Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Zach
everybody.
Woods, right here. Look at that. Hi, Zach.
Hi.
I like your sweater.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Someone recently told a friend of mine that she'd seen me and that she was like, man, he's so built. And I think what it was is I was wearing this sweater, which makes me look like I have a little bit more body mass than I usually do. But it's not true. I'm as skeletal as ever underneath.
Since then, you wear the sweater
Constantly.
all the
I
time.
haven't taken it off since.
Zach, let's talk about this season of Silicon Valley.
All right.
Are we in season 3 or 4 right now?
4.
Season 4.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Before every season, I know a lot of these shows, be they comedy or drama, that are kind of like Homeland is about the intelligence community, so they meet with members of the intelligence community. I know Veep has people that come on board that are consultants like Frank Rich. Do you guys have the same thing on Silicon Valley? Do you meet with people beforehand, or do you leave that kind of to the writers?
The writers do big research trips, but this year was the first time we went up and we did a screening at Amazon and we did a screening at Google. And the big shock about Google to me was like, it's much more like, I thought it would be like this fortress, like the Death Star or something, like where everything's like glossy and
Like Hooli in the show?
Yeah, but it's not. It's like much more like casual. Like it wasn't as fancy as I thought it would be. So there's a real hot scoop. Google's slightly less fancy than one might expect. But Amazon,
I think I was
on the other
naturally waiting for the hot scoop to come, so I'm
It's
sorry
never
that you
gonna come.
could like
And
nip that in the butt right away for me.
I wish I had some real dirt. I wish I'd seen a murder at Google or something, but no such luck.
So you go around screening it, and do people end up? I know, again, not to compare, but I know with Veep, a lot of people in politics think that the show is about the other party or something.
Yeah, it always happens. Like people are like, "Oh man, I'm so sick of interacting with people." Like I watch your show. You guys get so right, man. I'm surrounded by people like that, and you're like, "No, you are people like that." they always think it's about the guy next to them. No one ever thinks it's about them.
a lot of Jareds out in the world or out in the tech world.
No, because I think the Jareds are probably too shy to introduce themselves. So I think like the people who are my character are just like maybe from far away. But it's really weird. Like the first season we went up to Silicon Valley and we did a screening for all these tech guys, and then afterwards they had this party and they just cranked up the bass so loud. And so it was all these tech guys who are like socially inept to begin with, and then there's just like thunderous subwoofer. And I remember having a conversation with Craig, the founder of Craigslist, where we were just like smiling amiably over this bass, and I didn't hear. We talked for probably 15 minutes. I'd say I heard maybe like 15 words like over that whole time. So it's almost always like a lightly uncomfortable interaction whenever we go up there. It's never like, oh man, that was socially lubricated. It always feels like you get the shakes after a little bit.
But I imagine, like any other satire about a particular industry, the industry itself loves the show, right?
Yeah, and people are generally very, very nice. It's just that
such a weird kind of self-fulfilling cycle that I think these industries have, where it's like finance loves Wolf of Wall Street, even though it's a satire about finance, and politics loves Veep, even though it's a satire about the ineffectiveness of our political parties, and tech loves Silicon Valley, even though it's a satire about tech.
Strong female crime-fighting duos love Rizzoli and Isles. Is that a crime-fighting show? I don't know.
Go to the NYPD, there's just like a group of...
They love them. There's just Rizzoli and Isles like figurines all over the place.
I'm more of a Rizzoli, she's more of an Isles. We fight about it sometimes.
But I'm having a real Isles day today. Yeah, I mean, what's really nice is like people are very welcoming there. And I think if people don't mind being made fun of as long as you get it right. Because if you get it right, then you've paid people the compliment of attention, and you've seen them and they feel seen. And I think that's what most people want in and out of industries, is just to feel like known. And even if you're making fun of them, as long as it's like, oh, they know me, they got it, I think that feels good.
And people want representation no matter how they're represented.
Yeah, I think people want representation provided it resonates with them as authentic. And then whether or not it's mocking or elevating the industry, I think either way, I think that's less important. I think in a weird way, I almost wonder, even if I was on a show that was like deifying Silicon Valley but didn't get the details right, I almost feel like people would probably prefer a satire that does get the details right, because people don't like it when they see their lives misrepresented, I think. Yeah.
Maybe like a CSI or something where it's about cops, but they don't really do any research. It doesn't matter. No one really cares.
Is that true? CSI is just a total fraud?
I think so. I mean, I don't know. I don't really watch. Every time I've watched it, I've been like, seems odd. They don't really solve crimes this fast.
There aren't really those gongs following cops around all the time.
That's right. Do you base Jared on anyone when you first got the scripts and you started thinking about this character? Where did you draw inspiration from?
There's a couple places. One, I thought about my mom. Like, I think of the show as like being archetypical, where like each character has sort of like a familial role, where like Richard is the favored son, Ehrlich's kind of the belligerent father, Dinesh is like the baby, Guilfoyle's the cat, I feel like, just kind of like watchful and quietly disdainful from like a high perch. And then Jared, I think of as sort of like the self-abnegating mom. So I thought a lot about my mom. And anytime I improvise on the show, like things that Jared likes, I try to think of things that like my mom and her friends might like the books he likes, the things he spends money on. Like in my head, he like loves like lightly scented candles and Linda Ronstadt records and stuff. And then also I thought another thing I based it on is like, I don't know if you guys had this when you were growing up, but I always feel like when I was in middle school, there were like teenage girls who were like sometimes like the smartest girl in the room, but because of sexism or just the awkwardness of adolescence, like we're less inclined to speak up or something. So just sort of like privately, quietly, enormously capable and have like a rich interior life, but very like. So I remember I read Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, because I was like, I feel like Jared weirdly would be into this book. So those are sort of some of the things I based it on.
And that's where you sort of pull from when you're improvising a little bit?
Yeah, I try to, so I try to think of like sort of maternal, like 60-year-old woman specifics.
Kind of makes sense because you could imagine Jared as a kid who spent most of his time with someone like a mother.
Well, that's the thing. I go back and forth. Like, so I try to do stuff that's like demographically appropriate to like a certain type of 60-year-old woman. But then also, I imagine that he's been like, had an enormously traumatizing life that he's just been like endlessly resilient from. Like I always think like,
what sort of traumas do you think
I've improvised so much crazy shit on the show. Most of it doesn't make it in, but once in a while something will sneak in. Like I had this thing where his like parents died in a seaplane accident, and then he bounced around from like all these awful foster homes, and like he used to have to fight his stepfather's dogs to earn the respect of his family and all this crazy stuff. And
that means that he can fight.
Yeah, I mean dogs, yeah. But
I think that scene would be incredible if one time he's forced into a fight and we see that he's actually like a really great fighter for some reason.
I love that, like when they made this guy, am I allowed to curse?
Yeah.
I'm gonna do it. Ready? Here it comes. 3, 2, 1. This guy fucks. Fuck. I said it. I'm gonna say it again. Fuck. When it turns out that Jared actually has a healthy and somewhat prolific sex life, I was really psyched about that. A, because it's cool, but like also because I think it redeems the character from just being this sort of emasculated eunuch who's sort of a doofus. Like the fact that he's has like healthy sexuality, I think is like makes him a more interesting guy. And in the same weird way, I feel like him being able to defend himself physically would be the same thing.
Like a scene from an action movie where he takes out like 3 guys.
Yeah,
like
just
very choreographed.
Quietly,
yeah.
Yeah, just like put someone down. But also, I kind of like the this guy fucks thing because I was like, I feel like in movies and television stuff, often the people who are romantically successful are kind of brash or super confident in a very demonstrative way. But I think like a guy like Jared, like someone who's like empathetic and a good listener and like tuned in and actually loves women, even though he has like somewhat complicated relationship to them in the workplace. Like I think that's someone who would probably do well romantically. So I like that too.
How often are you guys improvising on the set? Because the show's narrative is sort of tightly plotted.
Yeah, we improvise a lot. Most of what you see on the show, though, is scripted. They'll lift little lines or little pieces, but it's mostly just the sort of like the garnish to the scripted main course.
So you guys get the scripts. Do you rehearse it all before you start shooting, or do you guys just jump into shooting?
We go to a little cabin in the Berkshires, and
Is that true?
No, I wish. It's my dream. I wish we went to a little cabin. No, we
love the Berkshires.
Yeah, it'd be nice, right? Just like again, I guess I like 60-year-old women specifics. Like I just want to go to the Berkshires with my friends, drink a
little general
dry
store.
roast.
They make their own butter.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I want to wear like turquoise jewelry. Yeah, we don't really rehearse. We'll rehearse once before we shoot it, but then they shoot everything just about, and there's like a natural. It's interesting. Like the first 2 takes are generally pretty tough and not very good, and then you sort of find a sweet spot, and then it starts to settle.
Have you guys all become really close friends in terms of the cast members? It seems like a lot of shows these days, whether actors are full of shit or not, I don't know, are very good at casting people that would get along.
Well, most of us knew each other before this. Like the guys who created the show didn't know this when they cast us, but a lot of us were friends beforehand. And I was
sort of being in the comedy world and
right.
Up,
yeah, there are a lot of them are stand-ups. I do improv. Thomas does improv, so from that. But also, it's like a little scary when you get on a show with a bunch of like young comedy guys, because it can feel like, oh, is this going to be like a big dick weighing contest where everyone's just trying to like one up each other, and is it going to be macho, or is it going to be like hierarchical? And it was like a great surprise and delight to find that like this particular group is like the most like tender, sweet, sort of like estrogeny men I've ever met. Like much less like testosterone driven group.
It also probably helps that you have the creators who are writing the scripts for you guys are Mike Judge and folks from Seinfeld.
Yeah, Alec
so it's
Berg,
not like you guys are like getting on set with other comedy writers your age who pitched some spec script or something and it got picked up and now you're all fighting over it. It's like, I'll defer to the legends that are in the room.
That's true. Although they're like shockingly collaborative. Like they're really not like guys like it's Alec Berg who ran Seinfeld for a long time and Mike Judge. And those guys could really like play the auteur card and be like, hey, I've created like major pieces of American culture. Shut the fuck up. But they're not. They're like really interested.
Did you write the Soup Nazi episode? Okay, then just get over there and say your fucking line.
Yeah, but they're weirdly, shockingly, really flexible.
Were you surprised by that going into the show? It's HBO. It's sort of a big deal. It's Mike Judge. Were you surprised by how collaborative the whole thing was going to?
Well, I'm going to sound like such a suck-up company man right now, but like HBO really has lived up to my fantasy. Like before I was on HBO, I'd be like, man, that seems like a great place to work. And it really is, because there's none of the like meddling. There's no like unnecessary meddling. There's just like a real like feeling of respect, I think, from the network to the show creators, and then that sort of probably trickles down.
They hire the best show creators out there.
And then they pretty much leave them alone, I think, you know? I mean, they give notes, and Mike and Alec are always saying they're like really good notes. But it's like, yeah, it feels, the place feels pretty characterized by like respect, which is nice.
Last season, you had a line in an episode that I still hold on to, and if I'm feeling down, I'll go back and watch on YouTube.
Really?
Yeah, it was at the end of one of the episodes where you guys are talking about Dinesh's necklace.
Yeah.
What was your line again? About what Dinesh does, what that necklace looks like?
Do you choke your mother with that chain when you fuck her in the ass? But that line, because, okay, so I think the way I think of it is like, it's like a Pinocchio story where Jared was like a puppet for Gavin, and then Richard made him a real boy, and now he's like learning how to be a real boy, and like each season there's like new human qualities that he like acquires, like new things he's tried. So in that episode, he's like breaking balls for the first time, like, and he's so delighted. He's like, I can't believe it, I'm breaking balls. Like, it's a new experience for him. And then I think like drunk off the novelty of it, he obviously goes a little too far and talks about him sodomizing his family. Yeah.
I love that line so much. Thank you for saying it out loud in front of everybody.
Anytime you want, I'll give you my number, and if you ever feel blue, I'll just.
I just remember watching that scene. It was such a shocking line, and it made me laugh so hard. In that moment.
Good.
You've played. I mean, Jared, you're probably most famous for now because the show's been on for 4 seasons. But prior to Jared, you played an assortment of different kinds of characters.
Yeah.
You know, I think of the movie In the Loop.
Oh yeah.
And how sort of feckless and almost like sociopathic your character was in that show. And I feel like we haven't gotten the chance to see you do something like that again.
Well, I mean, it's just hang around me in my daily life, and just feckless and sociopathic is the name of the game. I would like to play another kind of dark guy. I mean, I like getting to play Jared. Like, sometimes the residue of the character sort of hangs on you after a day of shooting, so it's fun to play Jared, who's so, like, loving and devoted, because at the end of the day, you sort of feel, like, good, whereas, like, shooting in the loop, like, at the end of those days where you've just been like trying to just like bury someone, basically, you kind of feel like your like glands are excreting stress hormones or whatever. It's weird, but I do like playing jerks.
Do you ever worry that like 4 seasons of playing Jared on Silicon Valley or something, casting directors and people will see you as someone who's just very good at playing this part, even though you're very funny playing like I said, an assortment of characters?
Thank you. That's nice. Sure. I mean, that's there's always some way of like.
It's a luxurious thing to worry about.
Exactly.
But still,
it's like total champagne problems. I have a friend who's like, who like anytime she starts to complain about something that's like that, we'll say, dear Somali pen pal, which I think is funny. So like, dear Somali pen pal, I'm like really worried that people aren't going to acknowledge my full dramatic range in future casting.
And I'll only be able to do the full duration of this prestige HBO comedy show.
By the way, do you have potable water yet? So I guess I have some light anxiety about that, but I feel like, I'll try to make sure I stretch myself and don't end up doing the same thing again and again.
You come from UCB, an improv background.
Yeah.
When did you start doing improv at UCB, and what was the theater like at that time?
I was 16 when I started. I lived in Pennsylvania, and I would take the train up to New York. And I never told anyone I went to high school I was doing it, because I liked having like a secret comedy life in New York. And back then, UCB has sort of expanded to become this like huge comedy juggernaut. But at the time, it was this like real shitty little theater next to a tile store, like a bathroom tile store. And it used to be a strip club / kind of like brothel. That I guess had a huge Hasidic patronage, and so periodically after it turned into a comedy club, like Hasidic guys would sometimes show up looking for the strip club, and then just like go in and end up watching like an alt comedy show.
And you have like you're doing improv and you look out and the Hasidic man walks in, looks around, and walks out.
Yeah, I like to think that maybe UCB like turned some of those guys on to like they're like, I guess I like Sarah Silverman or whatever. Like they like it recruited a portion of the hit.
What was how did you discover comedy growing up? What led you to UCB in New York at the age of 16?
I wanted to be a jazz musician when I was a kid, and I played trumpet, and then I got braces and I couldn't really play anymore. And I used to practice hours a day. I was really obsessed with trumpet, and then I had all this free time where I used to be practicing, and I think in a weird way it was the appeal of improv. Like I had this fantasy of myself as a jazz musician playing in these like underground basement clubs, making stuff up every night, making no money, all that, and improv was basically all that. You're like in these strange clubs at night, making things up, making no money.
Did you have comedians or movies or anything that you were like, you knew that you loved comedy? Or was it kind of just a risk and the idea of improv that you were jumping into?
I did, but I wasn't like a huge comedy hound. I loved the Marx Brothers. I really liked Christopher Guest. I loved The British Office. Steve Martin. There's like stuff I liked, but I wasn't like the kid who was going around like quoting Monty Python all the time.
Thank God.
Thank God. Yeah.
I loved comedy, and the kids that would quote Monty Python in front of me, like, please don't.
Yeah.
The British accent, don't do that.
Oh, it's awful, awful. Anytime there's like a real threshold for acceptable whimsy, and once someone passes it, it can be pretty tough. Once someone is like...
Best way to define children quoting Monty Python at you. This is unacceptable whimsy at this point.
You're too whimsical, dude. Tone it down. Yeah.
So you just got to work with Christopher Guest, right?
Yeah.
Mascots just came out on Netflix.
Yeah.
You brought him up. What was that like working with a hero?
It was fun. He's interesting. Like, I guess for some reason I thought he would be a little scary. Maybe because the point of view of those movies is so like unsparing. Like you watch Waiting for Guffman, it's like got such X-ray vision for people's unflattering quirks, But he's actually like a very, very nice, very, very soft-spoken guy. It was really fun. I was with Sarah Baker. We were like a duo together. And Sarah Baker, I don't know if you guys watched Louie, but she was, among many other things, but she was in the Fat Girl episode of Louie. And she's so good. So that was like really exciting. It's such a fun thing about my job, which is that occasionally you'll see an episode of television and be like, oh yes, like I love that person. And then like within a few months, sometimes you get to like meet them and work with them. And it's just like the best.
Does that happen on Silicon Valley a lot with actors that come in?
Yeah, that happens. Yeah. That happens sometimes.
Who have you had moments with like that with on Silicon Valley?
Well, Haley Joel Osment is in this season, and he's great. But there was one sort of surreal moment where we were like killing time on set, and we started like, we'd chant like, show us a feat of strength, show us a feat of strength, and then each person would have to demonstrate a feat of strength. So Thomas would do like a bunch of push-ups, or Kumail did this thing where he like put his arms on the sides of a chair and did all these like, I don't know what they're called, but, and then Haley Joel Osment was like, to me, he was like,
comedians who've started working out since they got relatively famous. That's so what funny. This is.
But I couldn't do a feat of strength because I wasn't wearing the sweater. Yeah. But
comedians who got personal trainers after the first season.
Exactly. But then Haley Joel Osment was like, would you stand up? And I was like, I certainly will. And then he hoisted me onto his back and then sort of like bent himself over so that he was an L, so that it was like I was parallel with the ceiling. Does that make sense? Yeah. So I like floated on Haley Joel Osment's back. Not to brag, but come at me, bitches.
Come at you and Haley Joel Osment.
Yes. Well, right. I was a passive participant. Yeah.
Before I go to the audience for questions, we were talking about how you do improv a lot. I know that you still make appearances at UCB.
Yeah.
You're in the city. Are you going to be appearing at UCB while you're here?
Oh, that's interesting. Maybe I might do a show on Sunday there, but it's Mother's Day, so I also might go to yeah. It's okay. You have time.
Got to get a card.
Yeah. You're fine. You got time. So I'm not sure. I might be there on Sunday or Friday, but maybe not. How coy of me.
Let's get some questions from the audience right here.
Hi, Zach.
Hi.
So I'm so happy you gave us a little bit of an insight into Jared's background that you thought of. So recently we find out his trick to being homeless that he reveals. Yeah. I was wondering if you could provide me any information about like how you thought he got into that situation, or maybe some other tragedies that we haven't heard about yet.
Sure. Well, like the way I think about him, in addition to the Pinocchio thing, is, you know, when you're a kid, they have those like, they're inflatable clowns and they have sand in the bottom and they smile and you punch them and then they go down, but then they like come back up and they're smiling still. I think like Jared's like that too, where it's like you can hit him, but he just like reappears with this kind of benign smile. And so I have like journals full, like right before the show started, I had all this stuff. His father was in a militia, like a hard right militia, and he had to track down his dad. I remember like he was in, I'm trying to remember. Oh,
wait. Sorry. Where did you get where was the militia inspiration from?
In the Ozarks. Oh, you mean, I thought you were asking where the militia was geographically.
That's a good answer though, that they're in the Ozarks, but obviously it comes from a clear inspiration of some kind.
Yeah, well, also he speaks in German in his sleep, so in my head he spent some time with like some really hard right wing. Like in my head he had this foster father who like trained German shepherds and like would train them in German, and then he would like absorb the commands because the guy only loved the dogs, and Jared would just get like the secondhand attention from the dogs, or wait, there was one other thing. I had it that his first crush was Anne Frank. Like the first season, I wore a little locket. You never saw it, but I had a locket with Anne Frank's picture in the center because I like the idea that he would be in love with Anne Frank.
Did you ever show these journals to the writers?
No.
So they're just for you?
Well, right before the show started, I wrote out a bunch of stuff that it was just like, okay, this is what I think the guy is. Just so I knew. And then, you know, some of the stuff makes it in. I guess I probably shouldn't talk about too much of it because who knows, maybe one day it'll make it into the show.
I love the idea that his father's a militiaman in the Ozarks.
Yeah, that actually did make it in, I think.
That did?
Yeah, it's a throwaway, but I'm talking about how, like, problems are solvable. And I think I say, like, you can find anything if you look hard enough. Like I found my retainer in a dumpster when I was in high school, and I found my father in the militia in the Ozarks. And I think that is established as part of his biography. Yeah.
Next question.
I just have a quick question. I'm also a Vassar graduate, so I can relate to that aspect of Jared's character.
Yeah.
And I heard that, I thought, oh, wow, this is interesting. But when you're on set, which is the most difficult person to keep a straight face with when you're working?
Oh, that's interesting. Well, everyone's super funny. Thomas Middleditch does these characters in between takes, these like really gothic characters, and they're very, very, very funny, and it's hard not to laugh at him.
Thomas is literally nothing like his character on the show. Like I've interviewed Thomas once or twice, and I remember immediately being shocked by how gregarious and hilarious he was in a very self-conscious way.
He's a phenomenal actor. Like that's such a complicated, even just the physicality of that part, like how like all his weird little twitches, and it's so understated and it's so good. Yeah, I love that guy. I almost went to Vassar, but when I went up there to visit, the guy who was like keep having me in his dorm, he was like, I'm gonna go do fighting in the basement. And then he just went, and I watched him fight this guy in the basement, and then he was like, okay, this is where you're gonna sleep. And he showed me, and it was this, this is gross, guys, I'm sorry, but it was a sleeping bag just covered in pubic hair. And I was like, I guess I'm not going to Vassar. But I hope you had a better experience. Yeah.
What year was this that they were fighting in the? Was this like Fight Club era?
Yeah,
like,
it was soon enough after Fight Club that likely was the motivation. Yeah.
Fight Club was such a horrible movie for the generation of young men.
Yes, it just unleashed every young male dickhead was like, oh, I can be who I want to be. Like,
I'm anti-Starbucks. I'm gonna fight you.
Yeah.
That's all it was. Right here.
Hi. I was wondering if you can speak on some of the differences between your character on The Office and your character on Silicon Valley.
Sure. I think in certain external ways, there's similarities in that they're like managerial and socially sort of outside of the circle in some ways. I think the main difference is that Jared, to me, one of the things that makes Jared funny to me is that he's egoless, that he's incredibly self-sacrificing and really has no horse in the race except the success of the company and the people he loves. And to me, what was interesting about Gabe on The Office is the opposite, that he was just ego, that the only thing that mattered to him was supremacy and dominance and power and popularity. And he was so ill-equipped to attain any one of those things. And so I feel like it's almost like the dark side and the light side of people in somewhat similar positions. Does that make sense? Yeah.
I want to go back to when you were 16 and you started doing improv at UCB in New York. The first time you did it, did you feel like that was the thing that you wanted to do, that you had found something that you wanted to pursue, or?
I felt terrible. I was like, I'm terrible at this. Like, I felt bad about improv for like the first 10 years I did it. I just was like, I'm a fraud, I'm terrible. But I just, occasionally you would have a show that was so like transcendently joyful that it would like keep you on the hook for the next like 8 months of self-flagellation. So yeah, I never was like, I found my home. I mean, I just loved it so much that I just wanted to keep doing it. But I never felt like I was born to do it.
Did you never felt like that? You never found a moment while you were doing it 10 years in where you were like, okay, I know how to do this now.
Now I feel better about it. Now I'm not like the writhing little worm that I was at the outset. Now, if anything, I'm repellently overconfident. But back then I was, I eventually, after probably 10 years, so eat your heart out, Malcolm Gladwell. Turns out you're right. 10 years is what it takes to feel comfortable.
Jared, in this season, I mean, there's been a lot of changes in this season.
Yeah.
Piper, their company is really no longer for them. It was sold to Hooli, and the guys outside of Richard don't really have much going on except for Jin Yang's new app, right? Seafood.
Yeah.
And I'm curious how, tell us what you can, how Jared is going to fit into this. I know he's quite protective of Richard, but nobody but Richard is really a part of what Richard's doing yet.
Right. Well, I think it's like, it's almost like a bodyguard who gets who gets laid off or something, but still like waits outside the house of the person he used to protect just in case anybody tries to hurt them. Like I think he's still just like kind of circling Richard, waiting to make sure that he's okay, and if he needs anything, he'll be like ready to go. So he's on call, I think. And I believe at the end of the last season, you were saying like it's at the end of the last episode rather, he shows up at Gavin's house, and because Jared was like traumatized by his time at Hooli, and now Richard is going to interact with Gavin. You'll see in subsequent episodes that Jared gets a bit overprotective in a way that might satisfy some of your fighting fantasies.
Is he gonna fight Gavin? Do you guys shoot in Silicon Valley or do you shoot in LA?
No, we shoot in LA. We shoot on the same stage where they shot the Yellow Brick Road for Wizard of Oz, which is the first movie I ever saw. So I think it's so cool. I'm like, the Yellow Brick Road's down here underneath.
Have you gotten the chance to spend any time in Silicon Valley since you've started the show?
Yeah, we'll go and do screenings there, but I haven't spent any like extended time there.
Good for you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Based off the show, it looks like
Yeah.
it looks like a disgusting nightmare.
Yeah, people are really nice to us, and what's weird is most people are great. Like just once in a while, you'll meet someone where you're like, oh goodness, like some young billionaire who's so used to being deferred to. Like if you're a billionaire and you're like 24. You're just so used to people wanting to know what you think that everybody wants to know what you think. And sometimes these guys will be like, start to hold court with you. And I just, once in a while, again, this is not the majority of the people. Most of them are lovely. But like once in a while, you'll get cornered by these guys who think that they're gifting you with the bounty of their insight. And I'm just like, I don't fucking care about you. Like in my world, this is irrelevant. Like, okay, so you made some like tech thing that I don't, but.
I don't care that you took your dad's money and happened to place it on a good bet at one point. Like,
yeah, exactly.
So what?
But then also there are like brilliant people up there who are doing really cool shit, and the Elon Musks of the world and stuff. So there's definitely like, I'm not contemptuous of the tech industry as an industry. But there is, as in any, like Hollywood, Jesus, like God knows, like Hollywood has its own crop of, unbearables. Yeah. So I don't mean to put myself above
Duffy.
it.
No, sorry. He seems like a nice guy.
Rizzoli and Isles, those guys. No, I don't know. I wish I want to start going real hard at Rizzoli and Isles. I've never met them. I actually haven't seen the show. Well, okay.
Thank fucking Christ.
Yeah, I want to grudge with, I want to what do they call it? A flame war? Is that what it's called?
I think that's what it's called, yeah.
Yeah, I want to really get into a flame war with Rizzoli and Isles. Not the actors, the fictional characters.
You get into a flame war with like the Rizzoli and Isles Twitter account.
Yeah,
That's who the flame war
I
is
bet they are brutal.
Brutal with the comebacks?
Yes, and just loyal. Yeah, I bet they're loyal.
Zach, I love the show. Congratulations on another
you.
season. It airs on HBO Sunday nights at 10:30, right? Or
10? I think it's 10.
I mixed the
Does
two.
it
Well,
say on here?
Veep and Silicon
10.
Valley are 10 and 10:30.
It's right after The Leftovers.
Oh, it's right after The Leftovers, and
10.
Veep is after that.
Yes.
It's really the best hour of comedy on television.
Thank
Zach
you. You're
Woods,
talking about The
everybody.
Leftovers, right? Yeah. Okay.
Zach Woods, everybody.
Thank you.